Well, good morning, and thank you so much for sticking with K24. We'd like to welcome you to our social hour. Shiko Kaitani here with you. Always a pleasure. As always, our social media platforms are still the same at K24 TV on Instagram, Facebook, as well as X. We do have a brand new WhatsApp number scrolling at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to contribute to our ongoing discussions on K24. Karibu sana would be most appreciative. As you can see on our screen, we are talking about interventions rather for migrant domestic workers. And that's because we've all heard the claims that have been made by a number of domestic managers who sought employment, especially in the Arab world, that became a hurricane, I tell you, of gross violations of human rights law. Now, the question is, what of the victims, and how do these individuals get the much deserved representation and justice for the atrocities, if you will, that took place? Of course, the issue of migrant domestic workers has been one of our most requested topics on this show. We want to thank you so much for the feedback that you've been giving us, as well as the requests. Interestingly enough, May is about the woman, okay, and her wellness. And so we actually started looking at the labor issues affecting women. Listen to this, and this is a report by the NGO that we are featuring today on the show. 151,687 women are domestic workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. How many more are there? Well, we want to welcome, by the way, our guest to the show. She is a human rights expert from the Global Justice Group, who are so passionate about this and are here to say, by the way, you should be caring about this too. Please welcome to the show, Stephanie Mbogo. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Shiko. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Did I do justice to that intro?
Yes, you did, absolutely.
I'm loving the outfit. We did not discuss this, but we're both in black and white.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today. Happy that we match as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much as well. So first of all, let's just get a context of what your NGO does. When we hear of Global Justice Group, what really is your mandate?
Okay, so thank you for having me today. Global Justice Group is an NGO that focuses on supporting victims of international crimes to access justice. And justice, you know, is a very broad-based kind of engagement and talk, but we're looking at terms of reparations, right to remedy. We are looking at compensation. So we have victims of genocide, we have victims of terrorism.
Yeah.
And right now in Kenya, the program focuses on victims of human trafficking and modern slavery, particularly the Kenyans who were, you know, migrated to Saudi Arabia, which when you assess the form of migration, we have realized is trafficking, and they migrated to Saudi Arabia. You know, I'll explain that a bit as we go, but they migrated to Saudi Arabia to work as domestic workers, and they end up in situations that can only be appropriately described as modern slavery.
Right.
And many of these people, because they have been violated not only in their country, but in a foreign country as well, it becomes very difficult for them to identify the jurisdiction or the area in which they can begin to seek justice. Because the people who exploited them may have been in Kenya, they're in Saudi Arabia.
True.
How do you go after them?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's the employers in Saudi Arabia who exploited them. How do you go after them? Or how do you go after the people who pretty much benefit from your exploitation? Because at the end of the day, a crime serves to gain, you know, to make profit for the perpetrators of that crime. If a crime wasn't profitable, then there wouldn't be a crime. So that is pretty much what we're doing currently in Kenya. So we are documenting the cases of these women. As you've said, there are a number. Those are actually official statistics that were released by the CS for the Labor and Social Protection in August last year.
Right, yeah, I did see that,
Yeah, so you can imagine how many more who have not been identified are there. And those are the ones currently in Saudi Arabia. So when you look at the numbers of those who have come back, you look at the numbers of those who are, you know, Kemboys. Kemboys is what they refer to them as, the runaways. Those who are not within the official government system, the numbers are so much more.
Wow.
And looking at the number of people who have come back injured psychologically, physically, is in the thousands.
True, or in a box.
Thank you. Just last week, we actually helped to bring back somebody. We, you know, the family laid her to rest
yesterday,
and she died under unclear circumstances. So an independent post-mortem was conducted, and it's the same story over and over again.
Oh,
and
geez.
The reason we're really passionate about this discussion right now is because Kenya has taken, I don't like the word, labor export policy, and pushing for Kenyans to work abroad. We have very many jobs that have opened up in Saudi Arabia for
Correct.
Kenyans.
Yeah.
About 350,000. The number of skilled workers, and skilled is a very relative term, but the number of people who will be migrating as domestic workers is crazy. And it's not a good situation. There's something that needs to be done to hold people to account. And when you hold the perpetrators to account, then only can you be able to ensure that there are better working mechanisms. Only then can you be able to ensure that not only are there better working mechanisms, but the people who will be going thereafter are protected.
Correct.
Because at the end of the day, we need to earn.
Yes.
So that's what we're doing.
I think that's really what gives this discussion a lot of meat to it. The fact that now we have these floodgates that are open for Kenyans to just move in droves, and you look at the brain drain that's happening in this country. You ask yourself, okay, can those skill sets be better used at home, especially with the kind of risks that are out there? But Stephanie, let me just ask, how did you manage to zero in on Saudi as opposed to generically the Arab world? I mean, what are we now starting to understand about this country?
Okay, why Saudi Arabia is because it sits as the superpower of the Gulf states. And why I call it a superpower is because they have the largest economy. And should there be reforms in the state of Saudi or in the kingdom of Saudi, the other Gulf countries will follow suit. But not only that, the number of Kenyans in Saudi Arabia is so much more than those in Qatar, in Dubai, in Oman. Yes, the exploitation and the abuses match, the terms of trafficking match, but the numbers, when you have a large number of people who are advocating for the same thing, it's easier for the smaller countries or those who have fewer people to replicate the same model that has been taken up by where this works for a much larger nation with a much larger population, yes. But also strategically, Saudi Arabia, we know the oil reserves are depleting and they're looking to get into the global economy. So that becomes a very strategic angle for us to begin to negotiate for better human rights protection.
Correct.
Also, they are looking to host the 2030 World Cup. That becomes a very strategic negotiating platform. You look at what happened to Qatar before they hosted the 2022 World Cup and after they hosted the World Cup. So there's a lot of human rights abuses before, but all these different people came and shed light on what was going on, and there have been immense reforms. So that is why we're strategically looking at Saudi Arabia.
Wow, interesting point there. I just learned something new. You had talked about there has to be some profit that is being made. And I want us to really focus on that, because I think this is a unique aspect about the crimes or the human rights violations. If you could paint a picture for us about the kind of economy that's moving around this human trafficking being disguised as domestic workers, what have you learned?
And maybe if I can just point to the remittances to begin with. So the diaspora remittances from Saudi Arabia are the second highest to Kenya.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
What?
They've overtaken the UK, they have overtaken Australia and the likes. And then beyond that, the labor remittances from Saudi Arabia are the highest in the country. They'll be looking at billions of Kenya shillings. Billions. And this is just within 8 months. CBK produced a report late last year, looking at an 8-month analysis. That's a lot of money that is coming from remittances. So this is domestic workers breaking their back. This is money that they're sending in home.
Jeez,
the population that are not domestic workers, they're in construction or are drivers and the likes, that's about 50, 60,000 as per the official statistics. So we're looking at a lot of this money is coming from domestic workers.
Right.
That's a lot of money coming into the country. Remember, all money that's coming into the country is being taxed.
Correct.
So that is money that the government is making.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's salient amounts that people don't get to hear about every day, but they are there. And that is why we're talking about modern slavery and human trafficking.
Right.
So the employer in Saudi Arabia, who is popularly referred to as a kafil, a kafil will pay a certain amount of money, which we have estimated is about 500,000 to 700,000 shillings.
Okay, just to acquire the worker.
To acquire one worker.
Okay, wow.
One domestic worker. So this money will be divided between a Kenyan agent and a Saudi agent, as well as foot the costs for their ticket, their visa, their medical costs.
Right.
Remember, the reason why there are so many Kenyans going to Saudi Arabia is because there's zero commission fees. There's no agency fees that you have to pay. So the agent will tell you, come as you are. Do you have a birth certificate? Don't worry, I'll procure one for you.
Oh.
Do you have a passport? No, you don't. I'll procure one for you.
They make the process so
it's
seamless.
So seamless.
Yeah.
You get into it and, you know, they just carry you along.
Yeah.
You're literally just, they sort everything for you. And you look at how that money is split. The agents make a good profit margin per person, anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000.
Yeah, that is crazy.
That's
money.
200,000, 250,000 thereabout.
Right.
That's a lot of money to make per person. But beyond that, the agencies also pay a bond to the government of about 60,000 Kenya shillings per domestic worker. So between the two of us, a bond of 120,000 would be paid to the government. We have 151,000 Kenyans, domestic workers in Saudi Arabia, just Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Where is that money going? What purpose does that money serve? Because I'm sure you've seen online on Facebook, on Instagram, plights of people saying, help me raise money for a ticket.
Yeah, because I'm stranded.
Because I'm stranded.
Right.
When they want to leave, the employer tells them, the kafil tells them, no, you cannot leave unless you pay me the 600,000 or the 500,000 that I used to buy you. That's the term
so now this has become a situation of an ROI, return on investment.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and so they own you.
Yeah. So
that begins to just paint a picture of the amount of money that is moving in this space. If you're looking at just in Kenya, an investment or you know a profit of 200,000 per person, you know, that's a ballpark figure.
Yeah.
Multiply that by the number of people in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar,
and here we hear even government officials even have these agencies. Now you understand why.
And, you know, it becomes a bit difficult to begin to investigate into it. Right. But also, you know, when we're looking at the advocacy angle of it, what is the buy-in for everybody?
Yeah.
Why should, because the agents, yes, they'll be there because they support to help securing this job opportunities, but what is the buy-in for every single actor in this? As agents, what is your role?
Yeah.
As a National Employment Authority, what is your role in curtailing this? It needs a very multi-stakeholder kind of approach to be able to address this economy, because it's a whole economy.
It is.
That is thriving.
Correct.
And, you know, when you look at the contribution to the Saudi economy, you know, just talking about the Kenyan economy, these domestic workers contribute so much to the economy, so much to the extent that in Philippines, because of the number of workers who had been abused and exploited, there was a ban on all Filipinos in Saudi Arabia. So the government sent planes, got the people, took them back to the Philippines. That's about a workforce of maybe 1 million people. And the Philippines negotiated for their domestic workers and their different workers and said, you know, for us to be able to send our people back to Saudi Arabia to work in your country, we need you to pay a compensation of $582 million.
Wow.
Which the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is paying. For them to agree to pay such an amount as compensation can only begin to hint at the level of importance that these domestic workers have to their economy.
Right. And it almost feels like we're just getting, and I'm sorry to use this word, excuse my French, but the S side of the stick. You know, because to be honest, why would you shortchange your own people when other countries or other nations are negotiating so much better for their own people? So I mean, it doesn't mean that they're coming to do any less work or they're lesser people. So it makes you wonder why we wouldn't do that as a country. But, you know, I like the report that I read from you. In fact, I was quite impressed about, you know, how it was, the whole compilation of it. And I want to get your opinion on the government, okay, and this whole justice system, and perhaps if you feel that they have completely failed to provide survivors with proper representation over their claims. How do you feel about this?
Currently, only one matter of a former domestic worker who was in Saudi Arabia is before the courts of Kenya.
Only one.
And it's currently ongoing. Only one.
Only one. No
The
way.
number of people who have come back in caskets.
Yes.
The number of people who are injured physically, permanently injured.
Right.
The number of people who are psychologically injured is crazy. But there's only one matter before the courts, which then speaks to the technicalities and bureaucracies that are there. Remember, this is somebody who has left Kenya to go on 25,000 shillings, 30,000 shillings a month at best, right? So when they come back into the country and they're in this state where they have not received any finances or they are sick, the family is thinking that the first immediate kind of support we can give is let's get them better.
All right.
Let's take them to hospital. Remember, psychology, what do you call it? Mental health issues are not that appreciated in our country. So even getting them to go to consistent counseling towards their healing is a problem. Then we're looking at even filing a matter before the court.
Right.
For many people who are very well read, can't just approach the court. You need to go through a lawyer.
Of course.
Which lawyer is going to take your matter pro bono and be like, oh, okay, let me take your matter, you know.
Yeah, how
and
many
who are you going to take the matter against? Probably the people who sexually abused you, physically abused you, are in Saudi Arabia. But what we're doing is, based on this evidence, we're trying to identify who is liable. What documentation can create a line of liability? Because it's something that's not been done in this country.
Right.
Even domestic workers who have been abused within Kenya, how many have you had have gone to court to receive justice? Or have even gone to Kudeha, which is the domestic one of the unions that supports domestic workers? How many have gotten their issues resolved? Very few. If you look at the ratio, yes, you may have maybe cases of 100, but you look at the ratio, that's a drop in the ocean.
Absolutely.
You know, so we're trying to see how can we engage with different people in the judiciary, in the parliament, right? Even in the executive, to see how it's going to be a multi-stakeholder approach towards helping them to get justice, to access justice, because it cannot be approached from one angle alone.
Yeah, and I mean, there's only so much you can do as this NGO, but I can see baby steps already taking place. So how is that going? Because you've talked about documentation first, but how is the process going? Are you seeing barriers, doors being shut in your face? How is that going? What's the experience like now?
So it's a very intensive progress, and you know, shout out to my team. And it's a very intensive progress, and you know, we work with Faith Murunga, who's a survivor from Saudi Arabia. I wish she was here today, but she had other commitments. And Faith is a survivor of human trafficking and modern slavery in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And Faith, when she came back to Kenya, she learned how to agitate for her own justice without having the capacity or the equipment or the know-how. She was doing what she could. Faith was going to receive bodies at the airport. Faith was going with families to the State Department for Diaspora Affairs to try and identify people where they are, would attend postmortems, would, you know, lobby, share posts, whatever she could do in her capacity.
Right.
And we got in touch with Faith, and through that, it's become like a snowballing kind of thing. First of all, the aspect of a right to remedy for human rights violations is almost unheard of, because who's willing to take my case? What do they want from me? How much money are they looking at? What do they benefit from it? Because there's been a cycle of abuse, you know? So it's a very slow process, very slow process, because also people are not very open to the aspect of civil litigation to start with. I don't want to go to court. I've gone through so much abuse. Already. Let me just be at home.
Right, and forget about it. Let me just try.
I don't want to be re-traumatized.
Right.
So it's a very slow process.
Right.
Which we've been at it for about a year now. And we've identified a large number of people, documented about 150, and looking to scale up. But you know, before people actually buy into what access to justice is, understand that, you know, we don't want anything from you. We are actually here to support for you to access justice because you've been violated. And it's so bad because there are people who do not know that they've been abused.
Right. I mean, they can't understand what it is.
Zero understanding of abuse. You know, you talk to them and you ask them, how was your stay during your tenure of employment, and they say, oh, haikuwa mbaya sana. Okay, so, you try to dig a bit deeper, because when we are looking to institute a matter, we'll have to appropriately highlight every violation. So they say, kwa Mwarabu kuchapwa na kutukanwa ni kawaida. In an Arab household,
so
being
they've
beaten
normalized
and
it,
being insulted is normal. So what's the difference?
Right.
But you look back at also where they're coming from, also the statistics of people who are migrating to go to Saudi Arabia, because abuse doesn't just start there. It starts in Kenya. A large number of people who got children as early motherhood. And I'll talk of early, let me call it teenage pregnancies.
Yeah.
That is a defilement that was not addressed. And then they are shouldering the burden of these children by themselves.
Right.
They have to make ends meet.
That's the next solution.
Right? So even by the time they are going there, they're coming from a place of abuse that was not resolved to abuse that is still not resolved. And it's a cycle of abuse that they are trapped in.
So this business of kuvumilia and nikawaida, normalizing things, has now become an issue, another barrier that you have to help these women overcome in order for them to access this justice.
Absolutely.
Wow, Stephanie, we want to take a short commercial break right now, but I want to encourage our viewers this morning, tafadhali, to please text in, especially if you do know someone somewhere who's considering, by the way, becoming a domestic worker abroad. We're talking about the Arab world in general, but you can see the statistics and why Stephanie and of course the NGO have zeroed in on Saudi Arabia. We want you to throw in your questions and even your comments about what more can be done, because as we're talking about interventions, the key word here, by the way, is interventions, meaning recommendations. What more can we do to improve this? Remember, this is a timely conversation as well, because like we had said, there is now a very huge opportunity for individuals to go out and work there. So what are you up against as well, and what do you need to know? She's here as a human rights expert to answer some of your questions at K24 TV across those platforms, and we do have our WhatsApp number at the bottom of your screen. Let's take that short commercial break, and then we'll be back with more on interventions for migrant domestic workers. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for sticking with us. If you just tuned in, Karibu Sana, Shiko Kaitani here with you as we discuss interventions for migrant domestic workers. We love this particular discussion because we're talking about people in the thousands, okay? Working in the Arab world, we are zeroing in on a country like Saudi Arabia this morning. And if you've missed the first half of the show, well, not to worry. I mean, my guest today will definitely highlight why we have actually zeroed in on Saudi, because, of course, you're seeing the numbers spiking. And, of course, we have quite a number of situations of human rights violations. What we're asking is, what about these individuals? What happens to them? And who is going to represent them and help them get the justice that they deserve, okay? There's a lot that happens, obviously, from the situations that we've been seeing being highlighted on social media, on legacy media as well, the psychological effects. Unfortunately, we've seen death cases coming from the Arab world of just abuse of domestic workers. And so in studio with me is human rights expert Stephanie Mbogo from the Global Justice Group, who are focusing on representing these individuals. In fact, they've already started the work, by the way, of documenting these cases. And oh my God, it will just blow your mind listening to the statistics. Stephanie, welcome back to the show. I was just telling her over the break, I can't believe I'm here discussing domestic workers and me in my own house. You know, they say, me and my house, we shall praise the Lord. Yeah, me and my house, we have, I don't know, there's a domestic worker situation happening. So where is my justice?
And it's there, you know, but I always say, he who comes into equity must come with clean hands.
Right.
Many of us do not get into employment relationships with domestic workers formally. It's an informal arrangement. Mom, nitafutie mtu.
That's the thing.
And you get somebody.
Yeah.
Do you have a contract?
Yeah.
Do you pay the minimum wage? Do you remit their NHIF?
Do you give them
NSSF?
their leave days? Do you
give them their leave days?
By the way, we need to have a conversation about that. I think that's going to be such a hot one, because we also need to understand where we're getting it wrong with them. And also, on the flip side, understand what their needs are, so that now we can start seeing a bit of harmony, you know, within households. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's focus on the ones who are looking for work abroad. We did manage to tease this particular discussion, Stephanie, on our social media platforms. Thank you so much for the feedback that we received. Brenda is our director today, so happiness. Let's take a look at those text messages real quick, and then we can get back into the discussion. Jacqueline from Molo says, hello, I have been interested in getting jobs out there. One thing I hear ladies from Huko, Saudi say is that their bosses keep their passports. Is a live-in domestic worker allowed to keep her passport? By the way, that's a very common thing that we tend to hear from workers abroad. Stephanie, please advise.
Okay, so the situation, as per the law, is that every person who goes should be in custody of their documents, of their items, of their phone, until they come back. That is your personal property. No one should confiscate it from you. But now we have a problem. We have training institutions, which have, yes, the NITA curriculum that says the same thing, but they like to give their little advice here and there that is a bit embellished with false information. And they say, please allow me to say it in Swahili. Kwa Mwarabu, ukienda, vile atasema, wewe fanya. Don't worry about it. So that uishi kwa amani. Kwa Mwarabu, ukienda, akikwambia akae na passport yako, anakuwekea vizuri. Okay? But those who, you know, from those we have interviewed, because we ask, did you have your passport? Did you keep your passport? There's not a single person who's allowed to keep their passport. Either they stole it away when they were cleaning the employer's room or their employer's space, or they just never saw it again at all. You look at the number of people in deportation centers because they do not have documentation. It's crazy. But I almost empathize with the situation simply because you're in a foreign land. You have never boarded a plane before. I boarded a plane, but I get flustered when I'm at the airport. I don't know what's what. I try to do my reading before. But they hand over that documentation. And before the 2017 ban that Kenya imposed, you know, your documentation, once you hand over in Kenya, that is the last you will see of it.
Jeez,
it was given to the crew. But, there've been a lot of reforms on that end.
Yeah.
So you get your documentation, but as you land in Saudi Arabia, your employer wants to confirm that it's you. Remember, there's a language barrier.
Yes.
Many of these people do not know how to speak Arabic. Your employer speaks Arabic only.
Yeah.
So the only way they can get to confirm who you are and your identity, yes, they have a photo, is through your passport. So they look like, they pick the passport, some of them with the intention of, I want to confirm that it's you, but they don't hand it back.
Right. Then they're like, oh yeah, it's for filing purposes.
Exactly. And they say that we are going to file your residence permit called an ikama.
Right.
And after that, that is the last that you will see your passport. Are you going to go and force somebody to hand you back your documents?
Yeah.
Remember, you're in their home.
Yeah.
You have no legal status. You can't walk out onto the streets in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
What do you do? What do you do? So that's reforms that need to come from that end.
Right.
As well as from the training institutions here.
And if the minute that, you see that someone is, or at least an employer is trying to take this from you, that's a red flag. You need to already start figuring out how to get out of that situation.
Exactly.
Right.
And one of the things that Faith, I see, has done in very many spaces and continues to do is to advise people. She's like, this is how I survived.
Yeah.
At this point, it's a survival.
Yeah,
This
which
is how I
is so
survived.
wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're
Why are we
supposed to be
sending people
working.
to go survive?
Yeah, I know. Just stay here. I mean, what are you surviving?
And, she tells them before I left, because they're given documents at the JKIA check-in door, literally, that is when they see their documents, their passport, their everything. That is when you first see your documents.
Right.
So if you're given your documents there, take photos, as many photos as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And send them to families, send them to friends, whatever documentation you have, take those photos. Many people, even your contract documents, are confiscated as soon as you get into the household or as soon as you're picked up.
Yeah.
What, you barely even know the name of your employer.
Yeah.
Your employer has maybe 6, 7 names. And they more or less sound the same. That's a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Okay. Thanks so much for that, Stephanie. And thank you for the text message. Let's look at another one. Evans from Mombasa, thank you so much. Many of these agencies promise heaven, and young girls I'm guessing, are lured, and young girls are lured by these big jobs in the Arab world. Okay, how can we make agencies more efficient at what they do? That's a good question. I think even this one, we can tie it onto one of the questions I had for you. And I like the term that you guys use as duty bearers, okay? Because you've highlighted quite a number of individuals or, who needs to be held responsible, but I'm thinking this is now the private sector that we're talking about. So these agents fall under entrepreneurs who've decided that they just want to start this work, right? So these are people, by the way, we really, really need to have our magnifying glass on because the process starts with them.
So fortunately, they're regulated. The National Employment Authority is regulating all agencies. Yes, they have their own private associations like ASMAC, CAPER, and the likes, but they are regulated by the National Employment Authority.
Yeah.
The problem is, though they're regulated, their licenses last a year or 2 or 3 or whatever it is that they get. So if you're being recruited by an agency, first thing is check the NEA website to check that they have a valid license.
Okay.
And many people, when they're going into this process, they do it in a lot of secrecy. So if someone is lying to you, no one would know.
Right.
Demand to see your paperwork. They tell you that they're going to pay you 50,000. Well and good. We've had cases of someone who came and said, oh, I was told I'm going to work a big corporate job in America, in this and the other. And I'm just like, yeah, there's also a level of due diligence that
we must
undertake.
Yeah.
And the agencies, why I refer to them as duty bearers is because for every migrant domestic worker, and I speak on domestic workers because that is the area that I have evidence on and authority on. They live with a statutory document. This is a form of foreign contract of service, as outlined by Section 83 of the Employment Act. And this contract is a contract between the agency and the domestic worker, the migrant domestic worker. And the contract duration is 2 years. So for the entire period of their contract. That is why I list them as a duty bearer.
Yeah.
Because there's an employer-employee relationship that is created based on that contract. And there are very many other, clauses in terms of leave, in terms of medical support, in terms of death, wages.
Yeah.
The whole 9 yards. Termination is a very well-crafted document.
But implementation...
But unfortunately, it's just a document.
Yes. Implementation is always the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I call them the core duty bearers of migrant domestic workers.
Correct. Because how many go there and then say they were abandoned by the agent that actually facilitated for, that job, which is so wrong. Because, Stephanie, if I come to your agency and suddenly I'm trying to reach you from Saudi or Oman or whatever, and I can't get you, I mean, what kind of business person are you in the first place? I mean, there's like no ethics there.
Yeah, it's so, right?
Yeah.
There are those who we have seen have tried to reach out when they're in distress, or rather the survivors reached out when they're in distress, and the agents did take some action, but also there needs to be a proper mechanism where the relationship between the Kenyan agent and the Saudi agent is harmonious. Because the first person that a distressed migrant domestic worker will call is the Kenyan agent.
Right. Who then
will call the Saudi agent. The Saudi agent may or may not.
Yeah.
Or they may call the employer.
All right.
But remember, the person that you're trying to save is trapped in somebody's house. So you have to be empathetic when you're dealing with their case.
Yeah.
There's a case of one of the survivors who sent photos of how badly she's been beaten.
Yeah.
And sent the photos to the agent. When she sent the photos to the agent sent to the Saudi agent. Saudi agent sent them back to the employer.
Oh, geez.
She's still in that home.
Oh, my God.
What happens? She's beaten more.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a harmonious...
Yeah. And professionalism. Professionalism, people. Steph, let's look at the next text message. Caroline, thank you. Oh my, this is so sad to hear the thousands of women in Saudi who have been abused, yet these women continue to seek work due to desperate times. What is our government doing to provide employment? Hustler Nation to Saudi so that our women stop dying. Caroline's point here is, and I think I liked that particular one that was selected, is about why the brain drain. Why encourage more technical skills to be going out there versus trying to figure out how they can work here locally? I mean, but anyway, it's a matter of perspective. What's your take on what Caroline is saying?
Maybe just before on that, in terms of domestic workers, the conversation on unpaid care work needs to be amplified. You're in Kenya. You have 5 children, you have your mother, you have your grandmother, you're taking care of them. Nobody is remunerating you for that. You have to take them to the kiosk with you, or you have to take them as Mama Fua, wherever you go. No one is remunerating you appropriately for that. Give or take, at the end of the month, you make 3,000 shillings. Then you come and get an opportunity that will give you 35,000 shillings to do the same things that no one will remunerate you for. To cook, to clean, to take care of people, to wash clothes, just caregiving and domestic work. When we begin to address unpaid care work, when we look at the contribution of care work to the economy, only then can we begin to understand why there's a brain drain.
Okay.
I'd rather go work for 35,000 than stay here, take care of everybody, be as tired, and get 3,000 at the end of the month.
Right, after all your deductions.
That's the reality that people are looking at. Yes.
Okay, so we've got 3 minutes to go, Steph. So let's just try and breeze through the next points that I want us to touch on. I liked the fact that you had zeroed this down to 5 terms that have been developed to describe the migrant workers' challenges. So when you describe what are the reasons, what is happening in the that situation on that part of the world, what are these terms that you guys had clearly highlighted? I want you to share them with people to understand why people are taking these jobs.
Alrighty, there's desperation. Desperation, I've already elaborately spoken about it. There's deception. There's coercion. let me start with those three. And let me circle in and zero in on those three. Desperation, deception, and coercion. Then all of them are properly culminated in profit.
Yeah.
And that's it. That is what is the problem. We have desperate Kenyans who are deceived by people looking to make profit.
Yes.
And who are coerced. Those who have realized they have been deceived have been coerced into spaces for people to make profit.
Right.
Yes.
This is so unfortunate. When we keep those terms in mind, it really does paint a picture. One other interesting thing that your report indicates is about the gender nexus of abuse that's happening. Tell us about these findings, because it's interesting to know what's happening to the girl child out there.
You know, you have to look at the past to be able to understand the present and the future. Domestic workers traditionally and statistically are mainly women.
Yeah.
And you look at also the human rights abuses, you look at women's rights progression, even in Saudi Arabia, on their own women, questionable. Then now you bring in the race aspect. Remember, we have a historical slave trade kind of relationship with the Middle East.
Yeah.
Bring in all those, it becomes a mesh of intersectional discrimination that Kenyan domestic workers face abroad.
Right.
And you find that men, when they leave, many of them are given, they stay with their contracts, they stay in proper accommodation. It's a very different space that they encounter as compared to women.
You're right.
These 151,000 people in Saudi Arabia, majority, actually domestic workers, all of them are women.
Right.
Because, you know, is an Arab lady going to ask a man to cook? Is she going to ask a man to clean the bedroom?
Right, and her husband, will he allow that to happen, to have a male DM, you know?
Absolutely.
That's just not possible. I mean, even from a cultural perspective, it doesn't even sound viable. Okay, this is now where, as we are wrapping up, where you throw, let me say, some responsibility to us. Because you've talked about the public also being duty bearers. Where do we fall in this entire situation?
Highlighting what is going on.
Okay.
A lot of the plight of migrant domestic workers I see is on social media. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, thereabout, but mainly Facebook. But it's private people, private entities that are trying to push this. And also trying to get into media, it's not an easy thing. I have, you know, if you just check online, if maybe there was a minute spared to just run an ad that is awareness driven,
right,
it would do a great deal of difference.
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
It would do a great
public
deal
service,
of difference. You know, it becomes like corporate social responsibility for such a large population of people. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Let's wrap up with Job Lukale, rather. I was going to say Kulale. Job Lukale from Karen. Thanks so much. Brenda, allow me to just read this as we say goodbye. He says, domestic workers have fundamental rights that should be protected by the employers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This includes and not limited to receiving salary on time, having a day to rest, and also well cared for. Upon completion of the contract, it's good to pay for them air tickets back home. Thank you so much, Job. Stephanie, how can people reach you ASAP? Should they require, by the way, consultation so that we can say Kwaheri?
We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, Global Justice Group, we're on Twitter. Please just reach out. You don't need to have an appointment. Just reach out. We'll let you know how to get to us, to our offices, and we can support you from there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Kazi Kwetu, by the way, even as the the public, as Stephanie has said, we need to do more in regards to this particular docket so that we can ensure that women are working and earning safely. If, of course, you did find this particular discussion engaging, provocative, if you will, give us your feedback, by the way. We'd appreciate it through our social media platforms at K24 TV across the platform. And let me say, Kwaheri, we're going to be welcoming, obviously, the interactive group who are coming up next. Today was Bring Your Toto to Work Days. I'm saying goodbye. Cairo, come. You want to come say bye? Come. Come, right? Come on set. All right, come say bye, Cairo. Come. Yay, you're on TV. Bye-bye. Stephanie, say bye.
Harry,
Say bye
thank
to
you for
people
tuning
at home.
in.
Bye. Okay.